I'm just returning the Suzuki GSX-S GT. Had it for a couple of weeks, and it's going to be coming back for us to do something big on. But just to start with, I wanted to do kind of 5 first impressions. The first one I'm going to say is obviously the engine. This is the Suzuki K5 engine originally, and yeah, do you know what, that might be 17 years old, but what a motor that is. It's still got the goods, it's still got the oomph. In fact, at really slow speeds in the weather we've been having, which is like icy and all the rest of it, it's almost had me a couple of times at speeds below where your traction control would kind of work, pulling away and stuff like that. It's just the weather's been so poo, but this has still got so much potent boom down below. And look, okay, it's not a really modern engine, it's been modernised, but for what this bike needs, which is for touring, loads of grunt, it's perfect. It still is perfect. That does lead me on though, talking about traction control, to the second point about the traction control, which is on this bike the anti-wheelie and the traction control are one and the same thing, at the same system. Now that only really annoys people like me, and when I say people like me, I mean motorbike testers, journos, that kind of thing, because we like to cock about, even though you can actually disable the traction control as you're riding along, which is an adult thing to do. A lot of bikes won't let you do that. Suzuki actually, let you be an adult and choose to do that. That's great, but the fact is, what actual buyers of the Suzuki GSX-S GT are going to buy it to cock about on it? I'm going to say probably none. And look, once you do turn it off, then this bike does like to muck about a bit, because as you know, go back to point number 1, it's got the GSX-R K5 engine, a rejiggered version of the GSX-R K5 engine. That is one potent bad boy. So yeah, it will cock about, but really, if you see me or anyone else moan about the fact it's a twin system, then honestly, just ignore it, because it's just a moot point. And to be honest with you, the triumvirate of the fueling / throttle response, the general kind of road holding of the bike, even when you've got the traction control off, it's still very, very easy to deal with. But one other thing, and I'm kind of going back to point 1 a bit here, one thing I love about its engine is it's got the growl, it's got that jigsaw growl right at the bottom. Just literally, you start up and go vroom vroom, you go, oh yeah, there it is, there's that jigsaw growl. And when you're kind of like slow speed maneuvering stuff, and you kind of like, you just want to just tap the throttle on just a bit, back like that, you get that GSX-R, that instant oh, I love it. It takes me back through all the Gixxers, the 1000s, the 600s and 750s that I've tested over all the years, and it's absolutely fabulous. Next up, I want to talk about the mirrors. This is some kind of fashion thing to attach the mirrors on one of these further down. I don't know, they're usable just, but I don't like it. I had a Kawasaki SX-1000, and that had the same kind of issue with the mirrors. They were put really far forward. I mean, they look ridiculous. They don't work as well as they can do if they're positioned somewhere else, but it's a very minor gripe because you still can use them. And the last thing I want to talk about was a bit of a Suzuki thing, because I've been in the bike journey for 20 years and I've said this is about Suzukis so much, and it's the brakes, which they are there, they are functional, and they work, and they do a job. That's about it. They're still not brilliant. They're not, and when I say brilliant, I mean in relation to other bikes in its class. But I've been saying this about Suzuki Superbikes, Suzuki Supersport bikes, Suzuki Adventure bikes for years and years and years. Not just me, loads of us have. It's just the way it is, sadly. That's not to say they're terrible, they're not. In fact, they actually have a really nice, Suzuki's the master cylinder, which allows a really nice kind of soft, gentle first touch, so you'd never get that kind of jung janky going on. And it's just there's like a power that you just wanting more, and then just when you're kind of thinking, I kind of like a bit more, what happens is a problem that isn't a Suzuki problem, it's just a motorbike problem in general, and that's the ABS kit cuts in when you don't want it to and releases your brakes. Thanks for that. I really can't wait to get to the time where ABS is good enough to understand that when you hit a little bump as you're trying to brake for something, you're just hitting a bump. You don't need the ABS to kick in and lose 10 yards to the car in front of you that was that you're going to stop behind no problem, and now it's an issue because ABS is cut for no reason. That's not Suzuki's fault. It's the same on pretty much any bike I ride. Only seems like the very, very top bikes have the software to not be annoying like that. I said there were 5 first impressions. There's been a whole bunch of first impressions in there. Oh, one more actually, chassis-wise. and that is within a mile of this bike. It was so obvious that it does not have electronic suspension, and that's not me being down on this bike. What this is more of a comment on the UK roads, which are bloody terrible. Really bad. When I've been mostly riding bikes with electronic suspension for the last 2 months solid, no traditionally suspended bike. When I got on this, it was like, oh my god. Now, actually, one really good thing about this is that even though the bike seems to be quite stiffly sprung, which isn't unsurprising. Bear in mind, it's got a lot of two-up kind of stuff going on here. This is what this bike is about. It's about touring, going to up. But the actual damping characteristics really dealt with these bumps that I am now feeling that I wasn't feeling before really, really well. The only thing I would say is, with the weather being the way it has, I've not really been able to load the suspension properly, and as it comes set up, it does sometimes feel like it's kind of at the top of its springs a little bit, which makes steering a little bit ponderous unless you've got the front loaded. But then it's really hard to make a judgment. Luckily, we're getting this bike back because we've got a really big project to do on this bike, so we're going to get it back. But first impressions of that are, suspension is obviously good, it's obviously useful, it's obviously comes very well ready and set up for 2 people, but in this weather I'm not really able to load it properly, which then means I don't really get a full-on feeling of what's going on. What happens then is when the suspension is quite stiff as in spring-wise, and it feels like it's kind of at the top of its springs, you're making the tyre do the work and the feeling, but you don't get a real feel for the tyre. Right, that's it for now. We'll be back for more later. Oh, I have done a brief bit of two-up on this, and actually, yeah, that was when it felt actually really good, was two-up, which is kind of not surprising. And I'm sure it'll feel really good solo as well once the weather gets a bit better, there's no ice and the roads are dry and not covered in that filmy, salty shite, But anyway, there you go. There's the few first impressions of this, and we'll be back later to talk about it more.